You just talk. You want to interview me, or you just want to yap your mouth off?
All right.
Welcome to July 2009. Notorious cult leader and pastor Tony Alamo is given 175 years in prison for human trafficking of underage girls across state lines. Alamo granted Fox News a telephone interview, and this cult leader didn't hold back in lashing out in anger. We have moments where cult leaders are flipping out at their interviewers.
Well, is he a pimp or is he not?
You know, you're a worthless man. You must know pimps because you must be going to prostitute yourself.
September 13, 1985, Ma'anan Sheila fled from the U.S. to Europe after she was accused of committing various crimes on behalf of the Rajneeshpuram cult. Even more shocking here would be her confrontational interview. Sheila is known to be very outspoken and unapologetic about her feelings. At first, she tried to manage her temper and answer questions respectfully, but as soon as the topic shifted to crimes from the past, Ma'anan Sheila's mood changed completely. Her face tightened and her voice rose. She wasn't sad or regretful. She was angry. The setting's already tense, but the moment the interviewer posed a charged question asking whether the guru was a pimp, the atmosphere exploded. This was in response to allegations by a former Rajneeshi that some followers had begun prostituting themselves to afford the Bhagwan's discourses and therapy sessions.
So your godlike figure is quite happy to be a pimp.
And I beg your pardon.
I said your godlike figure is happy to be a pimp.
I beg your pardon.
Sheila didn't hesitate. It wasn't just a comeback, but a slap across the face of polite television decorum. Her response stunned the anchor, made audiences reel, and became a viral mainstay decades later, preserved and endlessly replayed in YouTube montages of explosive interviews. But for Sheila, this wasn't just about defense, more about domination. Her voice carried the fury of someone both insulted and unimpressed. Instead of letting go, the interviewer decided to insist on his claims, and to no one's surprise, Sheila had the perfect response for him.
You know, you're a worthless man. You must know pimps because you must be going to prostitute yourself.
Perhaps hoping to save face, the interviewer suggested that she was afraid of being cornered by his tough questions, so she was running for cover. To this, Sheila only smiled and mocked him with yet another witty answer.
And person like you make me run for cover? That's a joke.
Interestingly, the interview takes a sharper, more provocative turn when the conversation drifts to the alleged financial exploitation within the Rajneesh movement. Sheila's anger was obvious, but she managed to control it, choosing to hit back with her words. Her tongue remained razor sharp. In a quick, harsh remark, she would deflect criticism by taking aim at organized religion. Now, she goes further to say that Catholics were lousy lovemakers who only know the missionary position. Oh man, the room fell into an awkward chuckle, the kind of laughter that comes when someone knows they've been outmaneuvered in live combat. Even the interviewer, visibly tense, cracked a smile. But if viewers thought the storm would pass, they were mistaken.
Sheila, whatever your plans are, we don't want the Rajneeshis. We don't want the orange people in our town.
What can I say? Tough titties.
In this other interview, when asked why she was in Australia when nobody wanted her there, she fires back with yet another, now legendary reply. You know what though? Viewers loved her because she was blunt, bizarre, and entirely on brand. Sheila's ability to bulldoze through social conventions became a trademark. She wielded profanity like a politician wields a press release, strategically and with deadly effect. The statement has now been immortalized, not necessarily endearingly on YouTube, where it continues to draw both derision and reluctant admiration. The interview concluded on a taut note. Sheila never offered apologies, explanations, or regrets. You see, back in the early 80s, in the middle of the Oregon desert, Sheila helped build a city from scratch. It was called Rajneeshpuram, and it was created by followers of Indian spiritual leader Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. At its peak, it had homes, restaurants, police, its own airport, and thousands of followers. Sheila ran this place like a CEO. She was tough, smart, and not afraid of conflict. But the peaceful image of the commune wouldn't last long. As the group tried to expand, they clashed engaged with local towns, governments, and law enforcement. Sheila didn't back down. In fact, she pushed harder. She started to spy on people, even inside the commune. Phones were tapped, hidden microphones were placed in rooms, even private conversations with the guru were secretly recorded. The real turning point came in 1984. In an effort to win a local election, Sheila's group carried out a shocking attack. They poisoned salad bars and nearby restaurants with salmonella, hoping to make voters too sick to show up at the polls. It became one of the largest bioterror attacks. Over 700 people got sick, and for many, this would be a moment when the truth about Rajneeshpuram became clear. Oh, they weren't just a weird spiritual group. They were pretty dangerous. In 1985, everything fell apart. Sheila suddenly left the commune without warning, taking several top members with her, and shortly after, the Bhagwan himself turned against her. He gave press conferences accusing Sheila of crimes and claimed that she had betrayed him. Federal agents soon raided the commune, and what they found was pretty shocking. We have hidden tunnels, illegal documents, and evidence of a carefully planned operation of control and fear. Now, Sheila was arrested in West Germany, brought right back to the U.S., and faced several serious charges. She was convicted of attempted murder, wiretapping, and immigration fraud. Now, she was sentenced to 20 years, but served only about 3. After prison, she went off to Switzerland and started a quiet life running homes for elderly people. For years, she stayed out of the spotlight, but then Netflix had to change that one. Suddenly, the world was watching her again. Her interviews were intense, bold, and at times even chilling. She had no regrets. In fact, she seemed pretty proud of what she did.
So you didn't care? In some
Put
sense.
me in solitary confinement, break my teeth out, break my ribs, bust me up, kick me down a hole,
Right.
and then come back and tell me about care. I don't know what care is, man.
October 1987. Something deeply disturbing played out on American television. Charlie Manson, the man behind one of the most shocking murder cases in U.S. history, appeared in a live interview on NBC's Today Show. Now, the interview was a window into the wild and confusing mind of a cult leader who had become a symbol of evil for an entire generation. Manson, locked up at Cochran State Prison, started the interview by trying to appear calm. At first, he spoke clearly. He would deny giving any orders to kill. He claimed he wasn't the person the media said he was, but this calmness would soon fade away. Now, his answers are turning angry and confusing. He starts yelling, making threats, and saying strange things that really don't make any sense. At one point, he leans toward the interviewer, eyes wide, and said in a low, angry voice,
"You're the ones who did the killing, not me."
It was a creepy moment that made people watching feel extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, murder. There's no murder.
There
in
was
the
a
Holy
murder
War.
of Sharon Tate. Come on.
There's no murder in the Holy War, man.
Was that what it had nothing to do with? Was it a holy war?
Yes,
Was
well,
Sharon Tate's murder a holy war?
The whole thing is a holy war.
Instead of accepting any responsibility, Manson turned it all around. He said society was the real problem. He blames the government, the justice system, and even regular people for making him into what he'd become.
You made me.
He shouted.
I'm just a reflection of your world.
His wild expression, messy hair, and sudden mood changes made the interview feel more like a horror film than a talk show.
Atrocious, horrendous, horrible crime.
It's atrocious from where you're looking.
It's atrocious where anybody looks.
Oh, no.
Oh,
no,
yeah,
no,
it is.
no.
I mean, what's really bizarre here, one moment he's talking about peace and love, sounding like a confused philosopher, and the next he's making threats and laughing about the justice system. Now, it looked like Manson was acting on purpose. He seemed to enjoy this attention. Even without his cult followers around him, the TV camera gave him a new audience. So he's performing like he's on a stage. Every word, every glare, every outburst, he knew people were watching, and that's precisely what he wanted. As strange and terrifying as Manson was, people just couldn't stop watching. The interview didn't feel like a typical TV moment, but more like a deep, dark reminder of a violent past that America had tried to forget. Manson brought that past back to life right on screen.
I am the devil,
He had said in this other interview.
and the devil always comes back when you call his name.
In another strange moment, Manson talked for over 10 minutes about trees. Yeah, he said trees whispered secrets to him. He said he was living in the woods, in the desert, and even inside other people's minds. He claimed he could send thoughts into other people's heads, influence their dreams, and talk to animals. Now, he seemed completely lost in his own world, but he sounded like he believed every bit of it. Often his interviews felt like some religious sermon. He's using language from the Bible and calling calling himself a messenger or a chosen one. In this one interview back in '93, he described a future where the world would be wiped clean by fire and violence. Now, these weren't just wild ideas. These were the same beliefs that led him to plan real murders in the past. Sometimes the interviewer had to call him out as crazy when he went too far.
No, because you're getting on
Then we'll go to another one, and then you make me look crazy.
No. You can make yourself look crazy, Charles. I can't make you look crazy, and please believe me.
All right.
He would go on to say that he's a victim of secret government projects, claiming he'd been spied on by the CIA since childhood, and they were using brainwashing experiments on him. He believed powerful groups were controlling his life, feeding him thoughts and setting him up. But behind the madness, Manson was still very good at manipulating people. I mean, this guy convinced regular kids, maybe vulnerable and naive, to kill for him. That same dangerous charm is evident right here in the interview. When he smiles and looks at the camera, it felt like he's still trying to control people, just through the screen instead of in person. Now, even though he was in prison, Manson was a hero to many. He got letters from fans all over the world. Some people really believed in him. He even said that he didn't need to act anymore. Others would carry on his message. And sadly, he wasn't wrong. Years later, a young woman carves an X into her forehead and tries to marry him. She said she was keeping his ideas alive. Manson agreed at first, but then changed his mind when he found out that she planned to display his dead body in a glass coffin for money. But in this other interview, someone asked him if he felt sorry for what had happened. And instead of answering clearly, Manson goes off on a rant and ends with a smile and a shrug. He didn't believe in right nor wrong. To him, life was about power and control, not morals. He never asked for forgiveness because he really didn't think he had done anything wrong.
I don't know what kind of game people like. People like publicity. Some people do. I don't.
It's November 17th, 1978, just 2 days before a horrible tragedy in American history. Jim Jones is giving an interview that showed the world how unstable he had really become. What was meant to be a normal conversation with the media turned into this disturbing, angry meltdown. It might have been one of the last clear signs that something terrible was going to happen in Jonestown, Guyana. Jim Jones was the leader of the People's Temple, a religious and political group that had moved to South America to build what Jones called a utopia. But over time, this so-called paradise turned into a nightmare. Jones got all paranoid, addicted to drugs, and became increasingly controlling. During this particular interview with NBC reporter Don Harris, all of these problems became obvious. So U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan comes along with some journalists, an NBC news crew, and worried family members. They had heard disturbing stories about people being abused, controlled, and not allowed to leave. Jim Jones claimed Jonestown was a peaceful place, but cracks in that story began to show. Jim Jones was clearly uncomfortable from the moment they arrived. He didn't see it as a friendly visit, but more like a threat. His voice, usually calm and smooth in his sermons, is now sounding kinda shaky. He would pace nervously, and behind his dark sunglasses, his eyes looked tired and wild. When the NBC news crew interviewed him, the last interview he'd ever give, he tried hard to seem calm and in control. He claimed that all the negative reports were not true and that the people lived freely.
Bill, we will bother nobody. Anybody wants to get out of here can get out of here. We have no problem about getting out of here. They come and go all the time.
But even as he said that, many members quietly handed notes to the visitors saying they wanted to leave. Around 15 people, some crying and afraid, told the congressman they wanted to go back to America. Jim Jones was furious. His fake calmness disappeared. He was upset not just with Ryan, but with the journalists, the cameras, and anybody who questioned him. And his voice got louder and more emotional.
People play games, friend. They lie. What can I do about lies? Are you people going to leave us? I just beg you, please leave us.
Don Harris kept asking questions about whether people here were really free and if they were being mistreated. Jones tries to dodge the questions, but it's clear that he's losing control. Regarding those who wanted to leave, Jones got really mad with one of his disciples who wanted to leave the group and even abandoned his son in the process. He believed the man just wanted attention.
If it's so damn bad, why is he leaving his son here? Can you give me a good reason for that?
Jones started blaming others, the media, the government, for trying to destroy him. He said people were just lying about Jonestown, but even though he tried to sound confident, it was obvious he was scared. He knew if enough people left, others might start to leave too. His power was slipping away. So as the group of defectors left for the airstrip, Jones watched with a dark expression. His body stayed still, but inside, he was panicking. He whispers to his close followers, and they begin planning something terrible. Now, to understand the ending, we gotta go back to the beginning. The People's Temple had started back in the 1950s in Indiana. Jones had gained a reputation for preaching racial integration and helping the poor, messages that would resonate in a divided America. And by the 70s, the movement had grown rapidly, drawing in thousands of followers and moving its base to California. To many, it seemed like a progressive force for good. However, behind the scenes, Jones's grip on his followers was tightening. He demanded loyalty, discouraged any independent thought, and punished dissent. Whispers of abuse, forced labor, and bizarre rituals began to surface. In 1977, after mounting media scrutiny, Jones moves this group to a remote patch of the jungle in Guyana, South America. Now, Jonestown is cut off from the outside world, surrounded by jungle with limited communication and armed guards at the gates. It becomes a controlled environment where Jones's voice was the only one that mattered. Over loudspeakers, he would broadcast speeches day and night. He spoke of enemies, spies, and the need for sacrifice. And slowly, belief in his words became a matter of survival. Jones's control wasn't just emotional, it was rehearsed. He would hold these events called White Nights, where his followers were told to drink liquid they believed was poison, as a test of loyalty. When no one died, he praised their faith. These drills blurred the line between reality and performance, making the unthinkable easier to accept. Life in Jonestown was actually pretty harsh. Followers worked long hours in the fields. Food was scarce, letters censored, and families were separated. Those who spoke out were punished, sometimes beaten, sometimes isolated. They even teach the children to see Jim Jones as their father figure or even a god. And despite all that, not everybody had given up hope. Some followers were quietly trying to leave. So when the congressman attempted to leave with a group of his followers, he and several others were ambushed at a nearby airstrip by Jones's gunmen. Congressman Ryan was killed on the tarmac. Back in Jonestown, as news of the murders reached the compound, Jones gathered his followers in the pavilion. A chilling audio recording captures what happened next. Jones tells them that there's no way out, that the enemies would come and torture their children, that death was a gift. Then, one by one, adults lined up to drink a mixture of cyanide, sedatives, and fruit punch. And were given the poison first. They would scream and then fall silent. By nightfall, on November 18, 1979, more than 900 people were dead, many of them women and children. Jones died of a gunshot wound to the head. Some say it was self-inflicted, others believe someone else pulled the trigger. The scale of this tragedy stunned the world.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
In June 2019, televangelist Kenneth Copeland made headlines, not for preaching, but for losing his temper in this interview when asked about his private jet. We're going to show you a man under pressure and uncover some serious problems inside a religious empire built on money, control, and the misuse of faith. The whole incident takes place outside his large mansion, where journalist Lisa Guerrero from Inside Edition questions Copeland about his purchase of a private Gulfstream V jet. The interview quickly becomes tense and uncomfortable, and it revealed a lot about how Copeland runs his ministry.
Isn't it true that you want to fly commercial so that you can fly in luxury? How much money did you pay for Tyler Perry's Gulfstream jet, for example?
Well, for example, that's really none of your business.
When asked why a preacher needs a luxury jet, Copeland didn't give a clear or honest answer. Instead, this man of faith avoids the question, gets all angry, and gives a confusing religious explanation. When Guerrero brings up a comment Copeland made in 2015, saying that flying on a regular airplane is like getting into a long tube with a bunch of demons.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did.
He tried to defend it. He said his words were misunderstood. But then he goes on to say that flying commercial is too stressful and spiritually limiting, kinda looking like Copeland has a god complex. His angry response in that interview wasn't surprising to those who have followed him for years. Copeland is one of the most well-known promoters of the prosperity gospel. Now, this is a type of preaching that says being rich and healthy means that you're blessed by God, and that giving money to the church will bring blessings in return. Man, sounds like the Middle Ages. Critics say that this message is dangerous because it targets people who are poor or in need and convinces them to give money they often don't have. Oh, Mr. Copeland has become extremely wealthy for preaching this way. His ministry owns a private airport, several jets, and a mansion near Fort Worth, Texas. His personal wealth is estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Gotta love those tax benefits, huh? Try to go ahead and separate the difference between donations and his income. The government said it had tried before to investigate how this ministry uses donations, but nothing's been done. Because religious groups in the US are protected from many financial rules. It's God's plan, man. The interview in 2019 revealed a bigger problem, though. There is almost no accountability for people like Copeland. Now, the issue isn't about a preacher living all large. It's about the preacher thinking we're stupid. February 28, 1993. Federal agents went to the Branch Davidian compound near Waco, Texas. Now, they had a search warrant for illegal weapons and wanted to arrest David Caresh, the group's leader. But the mission turned into a shootout. What followed would be a long, tense, 51-day standoff between Caresh's group and the U.S. government. During that time, Caresh did a live phone interview with CNN. And what he said would shock many people and give the world a clearer look at who he really was. So during this interview, Caresh didn't raise his voice or even threaten violence. He spoke softly and very calmly, but the content of what he was saying was disturbing. Instead of offering any clear answers, he responded to simple questions with long, tangled explanations, full of biblical references and mysterious ideas. He said that the world had rejected his teachings and claimed that he had a divine role. At one point, he showed his frustration when he was asked if he had guns and what he would do if they had trespassers.
They come in here with a gun and they start shooting at us. What would you do? Tell me, be realistic.
This interview gave people their first real look at who David was, and it raised many questions. Caresh had been leading the Branch Davidians for years, preaching that the world was nearing its end. His followers believed that he was chosen by God to reveal the true meaning of the Bible's final book, Revelation. Now, he tells them that a great battle was coming, and that they had to be ready for it. So they stayed inside this large compound near Waco, following his every word. But the government believed that something else was kind of happening. The feds had suspected Caresh was stockpiling illegal weapons. There was also disturbing reports of child abuse and underage marriages. Caresh did say they'd taken multiple spiritual wives, some of them very young, and claimed that these relationships were commanded by God, so it was okay. On February 28, 1993, ATF agents would arrive at the compound with a search warrant. Their goal was to investigate and possibly arrest Caresh. But when they got too close, gunfire erupted. 4 federal agents were killed, along with 6 Branch Davidians. The operation turned into a siege. Now, this was the beginning of a 51-day standoff between Caresh and the U.S. government. Negotiators kept on trying to talk him down, hoping to avoid any further violence. At first, Caresh appeared open to discussion. He promised that he'd surrender once he completed writing a religious manuscript, an explanation of his beliefs about the book of Revelation. But those pages never came. Each time he missed a deadline, he changed his reasoning. Negotiators grew frustrated, unsure whether he's stalling, strategizing, or simply lost in his own sense of mission. Then came the CNN interview, which would shock the public and alarm officials. Caresh didn't use the platform to seek peace nor clarity. Instead, he would use it to deliver what sounded like a final sermon. He didn't seem interested in compromise. What troubled the FBI the most was how sincere he sounded. He wasn't acting. He really believed his own story. He saw himself not as a criminal or a hostage taker, but as a spiritual leader under attack. And that belief made it nearly impossible to persuade him to surrender. Conditions inside the compound worsened over the weeks. Food and medicine was running low. Some children were allowed to leave, but many stayed. Caresh said that they'd be safe and that everything happening was a part of God's will. Eventually, the FBI made a move, and on April 19, 1993, tanks rolled toward the compound, and tear gas is thrown in trying to force people out. The plan wasn't to harm anyone, but to end the standoff peacefully. But out of nowhere, fire breaks out, and within minutes, flame engulfs the compound. 76 people died, including Caresh. Forensics will tell you that many victims, especially children, died from the smoke inhalation. Others, including Caresh, were found with gunshot wounds. Some appeared to have died by suicide. Now, the cause of fire remains disputed. The feds will tell you that it was set from within the compound, but survivors, however, offer mixed accounts.
Hey, all right. Listen, you just talk. You want to interview me, or you just want to yap your mouth off?
Lastly, we arrive at September 25th, 2008. Federal agents raid the compound of Tony Alamo Christian Ministries in Arkansas. Now, this is a result of the suspicion, allegation, and media attention surrounding Tony Alamo, a man who said he was a Christian preacher, but was actually the leader of one of the most harmful cults in the U.S. Just days later, Tony Alamo, now wanted by authorities, granted a telephone interview with Fox News. What was supposed to be a defensive interview turned into something far more shocking. Now, we didn't just see how guilty he was, but also how disturbed this man was. A man who had controlled others through manipulation. It was a moment when Alamo's carefully constructed image of a godly leader cracked to expose the dangerous reality of his mental state. Alamo sounded confused, angry, and completely unpredictable. He constantly interrupted the reporters, shouting over them and ranting about strange political conspiracies.
This is what I've accused the federal government of, and the Vatican, and they definitely are guilty of homosexuality.
His behavior was erratic, and it quickly became clear that he wasn't trying to defend himself rationally. Instead, he's just lashing out, claiming that he's being persecuted like a prophet, comparing himself to some biblical figures. Oh, that anger and delusion becomes the focus rather than any clear defense of his actions. So when questioned about the serious allegations of child abuse, Alamo didn't directly deny him. Instead, he resorted to wild conspiracy theories, saying that the government was lying about him and accusing the media of trying to destroy him. Those answers weren't logical nor coherent. Instead of apologizing or even explaining something, he insisted that everybody who accused him was lying. Now, what stood out the most wasn't his own denial, but how desperately he clung to his delusions of being right. Tony Alamo had built his empire by pretending to be a preacher. Now, he claimed to be chosen by God to lead a pure, persecuted Christian community. But we can all sense the reality was much darker. His organization, under the guise of religious devotion, trapped people in a cult where children were forced into abuse situations, marriages, and even labor. Former members would tell you about an environment where girls were forced to marry Alamo and face violent punishment for disobedience. This man demanded absolute obedience and stripped away all freedoms from his followers. The Fox interview showed what the survivors had been saying for years, that Alamo believed he was above everyone else, and that his delusions of divine power made him really dangerous. He didn't just control his followers, he really believed he was invincible. His responses to the interviewers weren't logical answers, but more angry outbursts and attacks on anybody who questioned him.
You don't know anything about the Bible.
So you're telling me the people that should be able to marry a 40-year-old and that's okay?
Now, before he became a preacher, Tony Boy had tried to make a name for himself in the music business, believe it or not, in the 1960s. But after being a failure in entertainment, he reinvented himself as a preacher. And alongside his wife Susan, he began attracting people, especially young ones, who were looking for some answers. He would promise them spiritual salvation, but instead create an environment of isolation, control, and fear. After his wife passed away, Alamo's teachings became even more extreme. His God complex rose to another level, and he isolated his followers even more. By the early 2000s, former members began to speak out about the abuse they had suffered, including forced marriages, physical punishments, and labor exploitation. But Alamo in the interview still denied these claims. He said that the media and the government were simply attacking him. The guy compares himself to Jesus, claiming that he too was being persecuted for his beliefs. September 25th, 2008. After 5 days of being on the run, Tony Alamo's located and arrested in Flagstaff, Arizona. He was hiding in a motel, trying to stay under the radar, and at the time of his arrest, he was unarmed and didn't resist. He's then taken back to Arkansas to face federal charges. The news quickly spreads, and within days, more survivors come forward, strengthening the case against him. By July 2009, Alamo's in federal court, and he's facing 10 counts of transporting underage girls across state lines for sex. The testimonies were damaging. Some of these poor girls were forced to marry him, and others were told they would go to hell if they disobeyed him. The jury takes less than 2 days to find him guilty on all counts. The evidence was overwhelming. Survivor accounts, photos, and the clear pattern of using religion to control, isolate, and abuse. The trial made national headlines and revealed the true scope of Alamo's cult operations. In the end, Tony's found guilty and given 175 years in a federal prison. That's a life sentence without the possibility of parole.